play will go under review.
Happy Tuesday evening, everybody. Thank you so much for being here for this week's episode of Under Review. My name is Joe DeRosa. You can find me on Twitter /X at show_DeRosa. And I'm excited for tonight's episode, everybody. Last week, we had the conversation about the Buffalo Bills' second-year players. And in the spirit of talking about the youth infusion of this roster, I decided to make this week's episode focus solely on the most impactful rookies from this past year's draft class. And with draft season upon us, I always think it's a good time to reflect on who you were talking about last year that got to your roster and the overall performances from each of these players, because even though it was a mixed bag of results, I think there's a lot of positives that can be taken away from each of these players, and hopefully a lot of development in year two that brings improvement and ultimately some stabilization on the back end and the depth or even in the starting points of this roster. So appreciate you all checking this one out, and I appreciate my guest for being here tonight. Friend of mine, friend of the show, someone that I interact with pretty often, especially during draft season. And you might have seen that when we were there in person last year, but also just on Twitter. He's an awesome guy, awesome content creator, and his name is John Helmkamp. John, welcome back to the show. Thank you again for being here this fine Tuesday evening. How are you doing tonight, my friend?
I'm doing wonderfully. I'm sitting in my beautiful living room with the grand piano, just basking in the sunlight of 7:35 p.m. Eastern time. Doing great. Yeah. No, I'm here. I'm just ready to settle in. Came with a little cup of tea, and we're gonna get cozy, and we're gonna talk about some young guys, some year two, some last year rookies, and get them going the right direction.
Yes, sir. Nice, cozy show this evening. Trying to make the vibes a little better because last week's episode about the sophomores was not as optimistic. But again, that's year two, only 3 impactful players from that class, and there was still positives to take away from it. But majority of that episode was basically being like, Anthony actually kind of had a quote where it's like, why didn't he cook, when he was referring to Dalton Kincaid, which I think summarized the entire episode. But this week, we're talking about our rookies, and when you look at each one of these players, there's one that I think we can both, based on how we expected him to perform this year, say, I'm a bit disappointed, but otherwise I saw some flashes from each of these players, even the one that disappointed us, that I could say we could build off it. Let's hope year two goes better. But before we get into that conversation, John, Combine just came and went, a fun time of the year for everyone who is a draft nerd, who wants to see dudes run in, short shorts on the 40-yard dash and jump really high. It's a very fun time, and it always has the draft community buzzing. I want to hear first your thoughts just on the Combine and really who stood out to you and who you really think could be a potential fit for this Bills roster, considering what the needs are for this team.
Yeah, I think it was a great combine. I was not a part of my team from my company that was there in person, but obviously glued to the TV and listening to all the reports and listening to podiums and all that stuff and digesting a ton of information that came out of there. The Underwear Olympics are always a great time. I mean, who doesn't like to see 330-pound men, rolling down the field faster than I can? So I think it was great. I think all in all, the position groups that matter the most to the Bills, defensive line, both interior and edge, and the secondary. I think those are arguably the 2 easiest position groups that the Bills are going to be talking about this offseason. I think that those position groups showed very, very well at the Combine. So as a Bills fan and content creator and all that stuff, I'm really optimistic about what's going to be available. I really think that one of the biggest things that might be a disappointment, I kind of tweeted this out, I think it was yesterday morning, I'm losing track of time, but I tweeted out that I think the defensive tackles that everyone is clamoring over, Derek Harmon, Kenneth Grant, those kind of guys, I think they're going before we're on the clock. I really don't think that those guys are going to be available, which opens up an entirely different conversation. Is this the year that Brandon Beane goes and gets aggressive and moves up into the 20s, moves up, 8 picks or so to go get one of these guys that he thinks is going to be a impact defensive linemen. He's got the ammo to do it. He's been talking all offseason. He really has been carrying on a tone of frustration, it sounds like, this offseason.
Mm.
Every time that I've heard him speak, it's like, yeah, I got to do better. I got to get us the playmakers. I got to get us difference makers. They're not easy to get where we draft. I'm more than willing to trade a first round pick for talent. Like, he's saying all the things that make me feel like he's going to be aggressive. But again, it takes two sides to make it happen. He can call every team in the 20s about making a move up, and they can just be like, no, I'm good. Like, we got a guy here that we like, and it doesn't pan out. So we'll see what happens. But I think we're honestly going to be looking at some guys in the secondary sitting there at 30, like an Andrew Makuba. That would be a nice pick. Would be a really, really nice pick late in the first. There's going to be defensive tackles, especially 1-techs, 0-techs, that you can get on day 2. That can just be some big old run stuffers, take on the double teams, stuff like that. That have abilities to collapse the pocket, not the super disruptors like Derek Harmon's 14% havoc rate or whatever it was, which is just out of this world for a defensive tackle. But some really talented guys on day 2 that I think are available as well. And then obviously we got free agency, we got trades, we got all kinds of stuff, all kinds of different ways to put the roster together.
Yeah, I really like your point about Brandon Beane, because you and I had this conversation, I think it was a few days ago, just about what would his mentality be in this draft. And for me, I'm something more of a draft, like, I don't want to call it a purist, but someone who is very much like, I don't want to trade up unless I am for sure going for someone that I think is just a can't miss guy. And last year, when we had that like whispering of maybe they do it for Odunze, I would have been okay with that, because I really think Odunze, his fit for the Bills offense and getting a boundary guy would have been perfect. They decide to stand pat, but they end up taking Coleman, who we'll get to in this episode. It wouldn't shock me at all if Brandon Beane decided to be aggressive in this draft, but it also wouldn't shock me at all if the Bills wouldn't have pick 30 anymore by the time the draft gets here either, considering some of the whispers of who they're interested in and maybe some of that aggression bleeding into free agency and the trade market and trying to go capitalize on getting one of the premier D linemen to just get the sure thing and build around that with some of your later draft capital. But I do think Kenneth Grant and Derek Harmon are players I would love, which is exactly why they won't be there at 30, because we like them. Right. And because we like them, they will not be available. But I do think that pick 30 it's interesting, because when you're in this position every year, there's a lot of fluidity, because it's essentially the second round, and there's a crop of players that are still very valuable that could still fit you well. But there's not as much urgency, because all those positional groups are there for you. It's just not the absolute top tier. So if it's not Harmon, if it's not Grant, I think that does adjust your perspective of, do we maybe pivot to the secondary and go for a cornerback like a Sharon Revel or a Trey Amos, or maybe if you want to go for the kid from Texas, Barron, if you want to go for even another player like Hairston, who had a really nice combine. Those options are there for you, but it's why I go on the reverse side and say, think of how many names we're saying that could realistically be there in the middle of the 30s. And what does it look like to maybe trade back and try to go get your third round pick in addition to the compensatory picks, and just go full send on a massive youth infusion for the following season, because the Bills are consistently good at finding value in the later rounds. And I think that when you have that ability, as annoying as it is that they haven't, quote unquote, hit the home run in the earlier rounds, it does give you some peace of mind to know that if they are accumulating capital, there is a good chance that they could find a lot of value on a prospect later on, whether that's in the secondary, whether that's in your linebacking core. So it's going to be interesting to see how free agency turns out and potentially the trade market turns out for the Bills, because that will obviously shape a lot of what you could expect them to attack in the draft, but also maybe shape if they are going to be aggressive or if they decide to stand pat or trade back and maybe just accumulate capital and try to build a young, sustainable roster for maybe the next 4 or 5 seasons. So any final thoughts on the combine, John, before we get to our young player review?
Yeah, you can't promise that you're going to run a 4-1 and then run a 4-4. That's my biggest takeaway.
I do agree. Oh man. And I was actually like going into the combine very excited for Isaiah Bond, because I was like, you know what, man? I could see it, right? Like, he's a speedster. That's his game. And he markets himself as that. And that's how they ran him at Texas. And something that the Bills could use. Granted, I have some concerns over physical profile and how he's going to do against press man, like any speed threat, because a perfect world, if you have a speed threat that could beat press man to be a consistent deep threat, he's probably not waiting till like the second or third round, most likely. But with Isaiah Bond, I'm thinking, let's see this 40-yard dash. If he hits a 4.2, like awesome, propel your draft stock up, even though they say it doesn't happen, it happens. But nope, still Worthy's record. And I just feel like you got to put your head down and go for the 40. You can't say it if you're not going to do it. I do think Bond has great game speed, but like,
well, his teammate Matthew Golden said nothing and then went out and posted a 4.29.
Yep.
So it's like, yeah, how about you just leave it on the track? One last thought just before we move on here. I just want to point back to Brandon Beane one more time. I think that he's really, really frustrated about consistently not getting one of these guys that can just blow it out of the water. And that's why I feel like he is going to explore every option very earnestly this offseason, whether it's trade, whether it's trading up in the draft, whatever it is, because you're right. Getting those consistent producers in the mid rounds are great and you need those. But like, man, 4 years in a row, the first round pick not turning into a, real difference maker, an all pro caliber player is tough when you're trying to get over just that last hurdle. You're right there. Right. And it's like, if one of these first round picks ended up being a super stud, and it's sad to point at Kansas City, but like Trent McDuffie, like a late first round corner that we wanted, that they moved up to get, but a late first round guy that is now considered like a lockdown all pro caliber corner. Mm-hmm. It's like, we need that one piece. You need that one piece. You're one or two of those pieces away from, and being cost controlled, which is a huge thing that needs to be discussed, by the way. That's why hitting on the draft and hitting those studs in the draft is so important, because you can go out and you can trade for it, but it's going to cost you multiple draft picks and you're signing the guy to a $30 million contract, or you can hit on it in the first round and they're cost controlled for 4 years of the fifth year team option. That's how you build these contending teams that are able to get over the hump. That's how Philly built theirs, mostly, is through the draft in the trenches. That's where it's like, Brandon, I need to see it. I need someone this year, one guy out of this draft class, one guy that can end up being a real difference maker. I don't care. I don't even care at what position. It doesn't matter what position. Just someone that pops, someone that can really excel and be like, oh shit, we found something. Like, I want that conversation this time next year. Like, when we're doing the rookie roundup next year, I want to be like, dude, we crushed it. Like, that is the guy. He's a stud, locked in for the next however many years. Like, I want to be having that conversation. And I
totally agree with that. No, I absolutely agree with that. And it's been a common talking point when you talk about Brandon Beane's drafting. I don't think Brandon Beane is bad at drafting, but I do think Brandon Beane hasn't found enough elite talent when you think of how many first round picks he's had in his possession. Now, obviously, Josh Allen is the example of that. I would argue, they traded away their first round pick for Stephon Diggs, who was an elite talent for them. So something of a win, but not someone he physically drafted. And then you have a bunch of either good or fine or just mediocre. And you look at kind of the track record of that and you kind of get concerned, and it gives some weight and merit to potentially moving on from 30 and moving up. The only thing that kind of concerns me is if you're going to trade up with a plan, right? And you bring it up, you want to find that elite guy. I have a fear that trading up is to go get a player because we are nervous about maybe a player or just being aggressive for the sake of being aggressive. But I don't think Brandon Beane would do that. I think if he moves up, it's because of someone he truly wants. When they moved up for Kincaid, they saw the vision of Kincaid basically being their Kelsey. He hasn't molded into that. It's not too late for him to. But I do think that, that was the mentality, is we are aggressive, but we have to be selectively aggressive. So you pick at 30. It's a difficult situation if you're talking about trying to go up and find that guy. But if you see like Matthew Golden falls into the mid 20s, I'm okay with moving up. If you see Derek Harmon falls to 25, I'm okay with it. Like, these types of players that not only fill the need, but have so much potential as being a pro, that's a guy I think it's okay to trade up for, and I could see Brandon Beane doing. I think at this point, it's just proven that Brandon Beane goes with the board, goes with the flow. If I got to be aggressive because I have this guy, I'm doing it. But if I can wait, I'll wait. And he's talked about both ends, which is why this conversation is going to go in a circle until it's on display, and he either takes the damn pick or he makes the poor members of Cover One, whoever's there, wait till day 2 to see the pick and stand out in the cold just to see the giant Kansas City logo appear on the screen.
Yeah,
anyways,
thanks for that. What a
Thanks,
great
Brandon.
end to night 1, right? We'll just stand out there
I mean,
with the Kansas
listen.
City logo and Xavier Worthy, and then go home. Cool.
I had like 5 strawberry Uncrustables that night, so I like to think I'm the real winner.
I forgot.
And also, how many bubblies, John?
God.
How many bubbly seltzers did I drink in that night? Tell the people.
You were pushing 10 plus. I can't remember the exact number. I cannot remember, but you were constantly, because they were free. They had them in the media room, the Uncrustables and the bubblies. And it was like watching a 6th grader go for his snack pack. It was ridiculous.
Bro, I was overjoyed, and I brought this up to members of the Cover One chat and got made fun of because I like strawberry Uncrustables. Uncrustables have a place in this world. Sometimes you don't want a PB&J. Sometimes you want the taste of refined sugar and processed bread in a plastic package. And you know what? It slaps every damn time. So if you hate on me for liking Uncrustables, that's a you problem. It's like, I equate this, John, to like, sometimes you don't want pizza, you want Domino's. Domino's is not pizza, it's Domino's. And it has its own
Taco Bell
pocket of craving. Taco Bell.
Not Mexican food.
Yeah.
Not Mexican food.
It's not Mexican food, but it's got a place, right?
Yep.
That's an Uncrustables to the PB&J community, and I had 5 of them that night. Found out they were 1,000 calories total after I ate all of them. Gains. Yep. Let's go. Anyways, tonight's episode, what we're actually focusing on, John, is the rookie class. Gains, let's go. There's a lot. Listen, if you eat 5 of them, that's got to be like 30 grams of protein, dude. Is it efficient? Not at all. But
no.
Hey, listen, I'm an active guy. Anyways, the rookie class. And I say mixed bag of results, but when you talk about rookies, it's a little different because that's their first year in the league. And there is getting your feet wet, getting used to NFL game speed, getting used to just the regimentation of the professional league versus college that while it's still regimented, you know, programs have differences and how they're going about their day and how intense it really can be. I think the NFL, even though you're an adult and you're meant to fend for yourself, is still offering you just a whole new perspective on the game you play. And it's a transition physically and mentally for a lot of rookies. So I have a bit more grace, which is probably why I'm more optimistic in this episode. But we're going to start with Keon Coleman, John. And your evaluation of Keon Coleman as a Bills fan is entirely dependent on what your expectations were him coming out of college and how you viewed him as a prospect. If you were someone that was bought into the idea of the Bills drafted this guy first because he is going to be your one, no more Stephon Diggs, this is your guy, you're probably disappointed. If you went into it at least the way I did, which was, yes, he is their first pick, but he is also a completely unrefined, super raw, but freakishly athletic rookie that needs a lot of development, then I think you could be pretty okay. I wouldn't say over the moon or super happy, but pretty good with this rookie season. But John, what do you think? I mean, just based on, again, your projection of Keon Coleman in the NFL and the Bills offense, what were your thoughts on his rookie season?
Yeah, I mean, you and I had very similar thoughts on Keon. You know, when we were there for the draft, all we were doing was sitting there and talking about the different wide receiver options 1,000 times over, discussing the upside, discussing who they could be, who should we go after, what kind of players should we draft? Do we want the speedster like Xavier Worthy? Do we want a big target? What about Brian Thomas Jr. if he fell? Like, we were talking about all these different guys. Keon is still so young, which everyone knows. Very athletic, very unrefined, all the things that you mentioned, and it shows. You know, it shows. I think that in his first year, we saw some flashes. But I think mostly what we saw on the field is what I expected from a 20 to 21-year-old player that has athleticism, has leaping ability, has speed after the catch, but is not polished in his routes. And I think that that's pretty much what we saw. So sorry about that. With Keon,
just got PTSD hearing that sound.
Sorry, man.
From waking up this morning.
From every morning of my life.
Every alarm. Yeah.
From Keon, it was really tough because before the injury, those few weeks before he got hurt, he really started to ramp it up. That game against Tennessee, 7 targets, 4 catches, 125 yards, that one catch and run where he just took off. We saw him a couple times downfield on Josh Allen's scramble drills. be on the receiving end of those, which I really thought that could be one of his biggest things, right? If Allen can trust this 6'3" guy that can jump out of the building on some of these throws down the field, then that's some way that he's going to be able to contribute, right? He's that big body down the field that can do that. We also started to see Joe Brady utilize him more creatively. Early in the season, he really didn't have much that he was doing. In those few weeks, we started to see him line up in the slot. We started to see them, cross him across the field, those free releases, those quick slants, which looks like it was an audible at the line from Josh, like, hey, if I like this, then we're going to him right here off the jump, right? Like, we're going to him. Like, we saw it a couple times. One doinked him right in the helmet, but a couple other times on the year, he caught it, right? So you started to see what the utilization could look like and what the upside is, because he does have the athleticism after the catch to house call anything. I don't care about his 40 time. He has speed. He has game speed. And then he got hurt. And after that, it just really derailed it. He only played 4 games down the stretch. His high watermark was 64 yards. He only had 1 touchdown the rest of the year. It was not ideal. So I think from Keon, he's pretty much what you wanted. Now, I will say that I have concerns with his potential development. I think there's things there to like, but the fact that he can't separate down the field is something that showed up a lot this year, and that concerns me, because that is something that he's going to need to know how to do. He's going to need to be able to generate separation at the top of his route, not just at the line of scrimmage, which he struggles with that too, but generating separation at the top of his route to create that space is a nuance that he does not have yet. And I'm really worried about that catching up. If he figures that out, if he figures out how to create separation at the top of a route effectively, it doesn't have to be great, just good, then you're talking about a wide receiver that, okay, he's a player that is going to be a consistent producer in this offense, potentially week in and week out. He's just got to find those refinements, that ability to create that separation late. And I think that's how he's going to win. And also on free releases, if we can get a speedster that's on the outside of Matthew Golden, that's going to run a 4.29 and take the top off of defense, and you move him inside into the Z wide receiver position instead of out wide at X, where he's lined up off the line of scrimmage and he gets the free release and he's running, deep overs or, different route combinations where he doesn't have to worry about creating the separation. The separation is created for him. Then I think that's where you're going to start seeing him really produce.
I completely agree with your take on his game. And I think that I have those same concerns just because they were concerns I had about the prospect that I don't think completely got alleviated. What I did see, though, were moments of confidence where if he was able to go up for a 50-50 ball, he has the height and the catch point separation to get it. And I feel like there's refinement needed when you talk about the stem and when you talk about separation at the top of it. But when you get to the actual catch point, he can absolutely dominate in that regard. And I feel like when you have that trait already within you, just because of your frame and the confidence you play with, once you can do one in the league, that's a great thing to build off of. So I can still see a world where Coleman builds on that more to become a true one just on the boundary alone. Like if he figures that out, whether it's his release, whether it is at the top, that is something that alone, I think, propels him to being a true boundary threat in this league. Because if you're separating and you have that extra step, great. But now pair that with the fact that even if you're not, you can win a 50-50 ball and you're just this hybrid threat on the boundary that makes it very difficult for defenses to plan against you, where if it's man coverage, that corner better be able to be physical and better have a size or at the least the radius, whether it's they play above their frame, to be able to match you. And that's what the Bills' vision is with him. I get a little frustrated because I think that with the abundance of slot targets on this Bills team, it makes it very difficult to give Keon Coleman more slot targets. But I do think that is how you can help him gain more confidence and also become that better player, just by adding that dynamic component to his game where he is lined up out of the slot more often, because based on PFF's charting, they had him at slot 75 snaps this year, wide 633 snaps this year. So you're talking about a player that I think has more value than you think when you talk about slot alignment and getting him going across the middle of the field and on these lateral routes. And it's a way that you can create separation, whether it's in zone, whether it's against man, but also be able to make defenses realize that you have a player that's more versatile than you are lining him up to be. And I think this is kind of something that I could say is a fair critique of Joe Brady is, does he know how to be more fluid or more versatile with some of the players he has in his backfield or on his receiving core? Because we had this conversation last week where some things with Dalton Kincaid, granted there's limitations in his game inherently that I think keep this from happening, but where you could stand to see him used in more unique ways that could help the player in turn build off of the fact that they're getting production from scheme. And I think that's the case with Keon Coleman too. Can we see Joe Brady do more things for Coleman, like free releases, like motion with this receiver, like slot alignment, where it's ramped up from a 75 snap count to maybe 200, and all of a sudden it's more of a consistent threat, and you are just mixing and matching some of the formations that you show and the way you're lining up these receivers, where maybe you have Shakir out on the boundary. And you brought up Golden, but that component to the wide receiver room right now is something they need, because if you can add a true vertical threat in addition to Coleman, now you have the flexibility to not have to depend on him to be a true boundary target, have him get that more freedom or more creativity for Joe Brady to line him up in different ways. And it's another dynamic to this Bills offense that makes them more threatening, more difficult to defend against, especially when you just talk about passing and not that running attack, which is already as formidable as any unit in the league. So I love those points. Anything else you want to add on Coleman?
Yeah, I mean, what you're talking about in terms of him at the catch point, he got one on Rick Woolen up in Seattle, right? They gave him that jump ball in the end zone and he came down with it. So he does have that in his bag. And I think that catch point, that leaping ability, all of that stuff, that's why they drafted him. I think they knew that he was raw. They knew that he was young. They know that he is very athletic, and they're hoping that they can mold him and that he can grow past it. Now, one thing to Keon's credit, and I don't want to sit here and seem like I'm ragging on the guy, because I think all in all, he did have a good first season for what was expected of him and for how young he is. He's handling it great. Like, by all accounts, Coleman's attitude and his approach and his mentality to everything has been great. You haven't heard a negative thing about him. He's loved in the locker room. The coaches love him. They know that he's working. Cool. Great. Let's give him a little bit of runway to progress in the league. He wasn't drafted to be one of these difference makers that we're talking about, where you need that guy that's an all-pro out of the gate. Now, if Coleman does develop into that, fantastic, and I would love to see it. I'm not sure that is a realistic range of outcomes for him, but I do think that he can be a legitimate boundary wide receiver that can be used in a variety of ways, that can come down with jump balls, that is good in the red zone, and be a valuable asset to the offense. But he's not like a top 10 wide receiver in the NFL. I don't think that's within his bag.
No, not at the moment. Definitely not. But could he get there? Sure. I think the red zone component's very big too, because even though it's not showing up as consistently, when you look at his total yardage and touchdowns, he was a big part of their 2-point package, and he got a few 2-point conversions towards the end of the season, which makes you realize, hey, we could do this here. Maybe we could ramp this up next season and try to get some more pass plays if we're if we're in 10 yards or more, to try and get Coleman in space or try to get Coleman on a quick hitter. And, they tried it against Miami. Ball went up in the air into Jalen Ramsey's hands. Didn't work out the way you wanted it to. But I do think that they are building off of that. And I think in year 2, I can expect to see some more of what we were just discussing and some more red zone packages that are featuring him. But it's also on the player to develop. And I am curious if he's going to add anything to his bag to try and be able to have a little more success when it comes to man coverage, not get pushed off his stems as frequently, be able to separate at the top, be able to draw yourself open in tight space, because the Bills need that right now. And if they get another player to help and he becomes a bit more of an ancillary piece, so be it, because if it works and you have someone that's giving Coleman some breathing room, I think Coleman is going to shine. And bring up the Seattle game, that was his best game of the season, in my opinion. I just think when you talk about how he dominated on the field, the confidence he was playing with, the Bills ramping up play action in that game too, and getting him involved in some of that, that was a Bills offense I dream of. I think, the film room guys have talked about this, but like the play action usage needing to go up and needing to get the receivers more involved, That's another way you help Keon Coleman. Get him more involved on play action shots if you can. And it doesn't always have to be just a vertical route down the field. If you got to get him going horizontally, the same way you were getting your tight ends to do it for Coleman, man. Give him some confidence. Get him in space, because you talked about this when you brought him up. It's something we've talked about in the past. With the ball in his hands, he's a weapon. He just is. He has the frame. He has the speed. Open field, he's very difficult to bring down. So use that to your advantage, and not just in the short distances or the 0 to 5 yards, but down the field. Let's get chances for this kid to make things happen in space, because I'm telling you, it could be a lot of fun and, just another element to a physical offense if you have a receiver that's physical enough to just generate yak by bullying people in the open field, undersized DBs. So anything else, John, before we move on to our next player?
No, let's move on.
Let us move on. Before we do, actually, people in the chat, see the shirt? It's cover one, premium, subscriber, partnership, 26 shirts that you should check out if you sign up for the One Pass in the description below. For just $60 a year, you have the opportunity to become a One Pass member. And I cannot stress enough that One Pass subscription is the lifeblood of our network. It allows us to have access to all of the resources that we are using on a second-to-second, minute-to-minute, day-to-day, month-to-month, year-to-year basis for all of you who check out our content, whether it's the written, whether it's our video content, our live shows. Your subscription helps tremendously with that, and you get some awesome perks. Like I said, you can get this shirt, which I love. I wear it pretty much every show, or at least every other show. Buy 26 shirts, who is awesome company. You could become a member of our premium Discord. There is some great conversation in there all the time with some awesome Bills fans. I implore you to check it out. Link is in the description below. If you are signed up, thank you. If you are thinking about signing up, thank you. And if you haven't signed up yet, but you think, hey, that could be cool, maybe I'll check it out, and never do, I appreciate you thinking it's cool. That's pretty awesome too. Let's move on. Cole Bishop. Now, Cole Bishop, I will say this. I think he was put in a tougher spot only because I think when he got to training camp, my impression, it was very early, was that they wanted him to be the starter and they were giving him the first team reps early. Gets hurt. I think that stunts his development. It stunts his ability, obviously, to be on the field. And you end up in a situation where Rapp and Hamlin are now your starting two, and he has to now work into a room that has already established that dynamic because he missed time. Now he comes back. And when he comes back, it's more of a rotational role. And it's the Houston game. He gets dusted because there's a miscommunication, the Nico Collins touchdown. And now you kind of see him almost in a way, like from my impression, playing from behind. Like now I have to catch up and also shake off the weight of this play that happened earlier in the year. I do think, though, that on the field, there were moments for Bishop where instincts were there. His ability to tackle was there. His speed to the ball was there. And some good reps in coverage. But also sometimes where you see a rookie safety in the Bills defense and you say, he's still learning it, and we got to give him some time to figure this out because it's difficult to be a safety in a McDermott defense. So, John, back to you. Your thoughts on Cole Bishop's rookie year?
Yeah, I can't remember if it was McDermott or if it was Brandon down at the Combine that was speaking with the media where they were asked about Cole Bishop and his development, what they expected. And their answers pretty much line up with what you said. By all accounts, it sounded like they were wanting him to emerge as their starter out of training camp. I can't remember which one was saying it. Sorry that I can't offhand, but one of them was saying stuff about Bishop, how they had really high expectations for him and how getting hurt in training camp, especially like you said, in a McDermott defense, when you're the safety in your rookie year, man, you're behind the 8 ball early. I think all in all, we saw Bishop develop throughout the course of the season. And I think development's just going to be the key of this whole episode. We're going to be talking about development a lot. All of them have developed, need to develop, are going to hopefully continue to develop. Bishop was very much the same way. I think there was instincts there. I think his speed to the ball is probably his best attribute. And I think that going into this off season, I think that he's going to have every opportunity to earn one of the starting jobs. You know, he got 3 starts down the end of the season against Detroit, against New England, and against the Jets. And in those games, I felt like he did pretty well. You know, I felt like all in all, he was there. I think the game is still a little fast for him at the NFL level, and the decision-making and reading what offenses are doing and understanding where he needs to be. At the safety position, if you're half a step to a step slow in making your decision in terms of where to go, you're done. Like they beat you. Like that's how that goes. So for Cole, the game needs to continue to slow down for him. He needs to continue that work in understanding of the Sean McDermott defense, understanding how the safeties play ball. But I really do think, I don't think that Hamlin's coming back in free agency.
I don't either.
Yeah, I think he's gone. So I think that you have Rapp and I think that you have Bishop. And behind that, please someone explain to me why it doesn't make sense for them to draft safety. Like they need more people in the room than just those people. And Rapp's starting to get up there in years and stuff like that. Like it needs to happen. Like I feel like they're adding a safety at some point in the draft. I don't know if it's going to be early or late, depends on the value, but I think safety is going to be in the plans. But I think that Cole Bishop is going to be one of those guys where his speed to the ball is really important. And if this defense is going to continue to develop into more of a man-heavy approach, then I think that that almost serves him better because it's not that complicated system on the back end of rotations and understanding where to be and things like that. I think that it'll put him in a situation more where it's just like we're manned up, like I'm a single high or we're going too high or whatever it is. I'm just responsible for this half of the field. You know, whoever gets beat, I help. Like, I think that that will help him play faster and utilize that athleticism and those instincts to the ball. Because when the ball is in the air, he tracks it down. Like he is really good when the ball is in the air, using that speed to get to it, to break up a pass, which you saw a couple times. And I really do think that he has a high upside. I think that he can be a better tackler than we saw from him too, because he was a better tackler in college. Again, I think it's just the speed of the game. I think once it slows down for him, I think you're going to see him trusting himself and being in the right position and making the plays. I think that he's a solid option.
Yes, I agree with that. I'm very encouraged for Cole Bishop's development, even though the rookie year was kind of I don't want to call it a disappointment. I think the injury early was just making him, again, have to play from behind, and he didn't have a spot in the room. So I was kind of always saying next year, this kid's going to be more impactful. But he did get his reps. He did get his opportunity. PFF charted him at 200 snaps box. And then for free safety, they had him charged at 219. So a pretty even ratio. And for Cole Bishop, the strength, you know, given his draft profile that had been talked about last year, was really more towards the box, right? It's not that he couldn't play both, but the aggression he played with, the processing he had, he shined a bit more when he was closer to your front seven. And I think that that component of it, when you talk about what you just brought up, which I do love that you mentioned this, the Bills may be pivoting to a bit more man coverage and more packages that encourage man coverage, is great for Cole Bishop because the athletic traits now can be able to shine without the deficiencies of processing if they do still exist next season to the degree they did this past year. If it is something where, I don't want to say you don't think, but rather, hey, we can man up and I'm just on this guy, I'm on this part, then I think taking the extra layer of difficulty away when you talk about dissecting the play and just this is what we're doing, this is what I'm covering, let the body decide at that point. That's really good for him, especially when you want to integrate more man coverage, but also try to get him more refined in his zone role where now it's, I'm just playing, again, kind of similar to my topic on Coleman, playing with a little more aggression, playing with a little bit more confidence. And now in turn, because I know that they could turn to me to play the free safety or at least the deeper half of the field, because I'm going to rotate if I'm a safety in the Bills defense, play with a little more of your head up and then just let that communication and that development continue on into year two the way it was in year one. Because towards the back half, yeah, I do think he looked a little bit better at the free safety spot. There were some miscommunications. There were some times where I felt like he played a little too deep, maybe didn't react to something quick enough, got there to clean up, but wasn't there to break up. And then, you know, here you are and you're charging something to him. But I think in year two, with the tweaks they might be having to the defensive philosophy, it's a great opportunity for Cole Bishop to cement himself as a starter. And then if that processing continues where they play zone and he is playing that deeper part of the field and there is no drop off, that is a huge boost for this Bills defense. Just they relied so much on coverage disguising and their safeties being able to play into a different position post snap, but be smart enough to get there. Because Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer were not the most athletic guys, but they played so quickly that it didn't matter if they weren't because they knew where to be just because of all the film they watched and just because of their understanding of defensive coverages in the Bills defense that, hey, if I got to drop to this part of the field because this is what they're showing us pre-snap, this is where I'm going and I will be there. You know, you can think of the Micah Hyde pick in the Patriots playoff game as the best example of that. Cole Bishop has an opportunity to do that, but now pair it with a very good athletic profile. If that processing grows, the player is going to be great. And like you just pointed out, if they can pair him with an awesome safety, whether that is in the draft or whether that is their splash being in free agency, if they are somehow able to go get a Javon Holland, which I think John pointed out in our chat, like if they could do that and pair that kid with Cole Bishop and have Rapp as the rotational or just some 3-man game, they would be very fun to watch. And if that would mean more dime potentially with Cole Bishop as a dime backer, that would also be very fun. I think
I would love
Bishop's
that.
athleticism, I would love it too. I mean, it's all going to depend on what they do in free agency draft, but I'm encouraged by just Bishop as the prospect and player. And I think seeing flashes from him, given the offseason and what happened, was all I needed. It was all I needed to feel really confident in year 2. Whether he lives up to it, obviously, with any of these players, is to be seen. But there's a lot to like about the way Bishop plays his game. And if they can get him more refined as a deeper safety, a lot of optimism in the safety room in Buffalo, at least where he plays. And I liked what Rapp did this year. So I would actually be perfectly comfortable, at least to start, if it had to be Bishop and Rapp, and then some young player you take, if it's like a Billy Bowman or a Makubo, like you pointed out, that like works in and then eventually could take over a starting spot when Rapp goes. But I'll turn it back to you. Anything else you wanted to say about Bishop before we move on?
I just really want to highlight his athleticism. I pulled up RAS here and I did a RAS compare between Cole Bishop and Micah Hyde. Cole Bishop's RAS was a 9.88. Micah Hyde's is a 4.71.
Yep.
Okay. Micah Hyde was not an athletic safety, but he understood the system. He knew where to be and he trusted his eyes. And that was the biggest thing about Micah Hyde. He's also gritty as hell.
Yep.
Once Cole Bishop develops those things, which he's going to, because he's a good player. He's a good player. He just needs time in the NFL. Expecting a safety to go out there as a rookie and be a difference maker player, especially in this defensive system, is not something that anyone should expect. I think that what we saw out of him in his first year is exactly the expectations for Cole Bishop. Flashes of athleticism, still learning the scheme, still waiting on the game to slow down a little bit for him. But once it does, he ran a 4.45 40. I know 40 isn't everything, but Micah Hyde ran a 4.56. He jumped 6 inches higher than Micah Hyde. Like, he has more traits than what they had for the better part of a decade back there at the safety position. I think that he's going to develop into being like a fan favorite safety, kind of like the two that we had before.
Mm-hmm. And just to bring this up from Spin, Devil on my shoulder, thank you for watching, Spin. Isn't Bishop more Poyer than Hyde? No, definitely more similar, at least in my opinion, to Jordan Poyer, but it's more so just about the position and the relative athleticism and talking about how Hyde did have worse athletic testing. But again, Hyde just played with faster processing as now, granted, we bring in Hyde, he was already a veteran. Right? Like, he was already in the league for a few years and he was doing that slot corner safety hybrid role in Green Bay. They bring him in as a full-time safety. He had more tenure in the league. So we're talking about a rookie who is going to be 23 years old and there's so much development ahead of him. So again, I just bring it back to, we already know the athletic profile is there. What can it look like when you ask him to have a more complex role in this Bills defense? And I think there were times where he did a great job playing that deep role. And I think it can be built off of, which is why I am encouraged and very excited that they took a safety with that profile. And I hope they do it again if they decide to draft someone, because it's a good class with a lot of athletic guys. And, you know, we use that term, but when you talk about what the Bills safeties do and their responsibility, it is a plus if you can get a guy who's just naturally fast, great vertical, strong, heat-seeking missile, great tackler. Those are pluses if you can build the development with it. The same way you talk about Keon Coleman being a plus for the receiving core if you take those traits and mold them. Will they? Again, up in the air, but I'm pretty cool with the pick. I really hope he develops.
Yeah, me too. If we want to use Poyer, same thing. His RAS is a 5.68. Cole Bishop jumped 9 inches higher than him on the vert. Like, same thing. We did not have athletic safeties back there. It was all the heads. It was all understanding what offenses were doing. And once Cole Bishop gets that speed, the closing speed, the ability to jump and break up passes and go up for interceptions, I still am very bullish on Cole Bishop's future, especially with the way that this team develops secondary players. Give me year 3 Cole Bishop, dude. I think he's going to be a force. Like, I really am bullish on Cole Bishop.
I totally agree. And I think Babbage, McDermott, the personnel they brought in, especially the DB's coach from New England, like all these little pieces and little pivots they're making, it's perfect for a player like Bishop. It just is. I think it's going to be a huge help for him, and I'm excited for year 2 and year 3. Hopefully year 2 is really good so that year 3 could just be like a yay, Cole Bishop, kind of like how we talked about Bernard, who someone in the chat did mention that too. Yeah. Okay, John, we got to move on to number 3. And it hurts me. It hurts me so badly. But unfortunately, I have to say the player that of the rookie class that at least had more snaps and more of a role, because some players, full spoiler, there's players on this list we aren't going to even cover because they barely played or they were special teams or relegated to like, development. With this player, he was on the field. He was prevalent. I had very high hopes for him. We both did. I was cheering in the draft room when they picked him. Yes. But unfortunately, it was, I would call it a disappointing rookie season, and that was from DeWayne Carter. And I don't want to pile on the guy because he seems like the most awesome dude. His Instagram is just constantly reposting his teammates' stories. He seems like the best guy. I want this man to succeed so badly. So please understand that this entire segment is just because we're going off what we saw in the hopes of development. But I will say there were flashes. There were moments for DeWayne Carter, whether he was singled up and was able to show off some pass rush ability, whether it was some positive flashes in run defense, which he had. And those are there and they are real and they can be built off of. However, apart from the injury, which derailed his rookie year too, which is kind of a theme with like most of this rookie class, there were just moments where he just gets completely washed out in double teams. And they asked him to just maintain a role where he could take on 2 when he couldn't. And he gets moved off the ball and he can't do anything about the physicality in front of him. He can't get through. He can't alter his, his position. He's just getting moved. And it's not encouraging. I will turn it back to you, John. Our guy, DeWayne Carter, what are your thoughts?
I mean, you pretty much said it. I don't think that there's a whole lot else to say about my baby Blastoise over here. Very, very bullish on DeWayne Carter coming into the NFL. His tape was great. He was a physical force in the interior. He didn't get pushed around. It's just almost like the NFL was too strong for him. You know what I mean? Like, that's just the way that it kind of reads. Now, can he continue to get stronger? Can he work on some technique? Absolutely. There's still things that he can do to be valuable. But as of right now, I have a hard time viewing him as a starter anytime in the future. I think that he's working to hold his spot as a rotational 3-tech right now. I think that's kind of how it's going to go. Or 1-tech, sorry. Just my brain is fried. Rotating in on the interior of the defensive line, which he came in backup spots of multiple players this year. But like you said, he got washed out in the run. Like, he did not have the ability to anchor down, didn't have the ability to just hold the fort, sink, the backside and take on the double teams. And that's why we're talking about guys like Kenneth Grant. That's why we're talking about guys like Derek Harmon that are similar in size to him and have that ability to just anchor down and also pierce through and create havoc on the interior, collapse the pocket, stuff like that we really didn't see from Carter when he was on the field this year. So it's disappointing. He's not trending in the right way right now. I think that's kind of my overall take on DeWayne Carter. Got a few years left on the rookie contract. Hopefully he continues to grow and can get some stuff fixed, and they can turn him into someone that's going to be serviceable on the defensive line. But I think that's about the ceiling for me right now.
And when you watched him at Duke, you saw some flashes in the pass rush game. I did think when it came to taking on doubles, though, it was something that he did need to work on. And I think the Bills really did want to get him in that position of someone that could rotate in and be able to, whether it was kind of fill in as a de facto 1-tech and just hope that he does well. But, given how thin the room was in the depth and with your top end not really playing up to par, it was like, can this kid give us anything? I hang my hat on the one hope that maybe he was actually starting to figure it out a little bit more and then gets hurt right after that Houston game, misses significant time, comes back. And in the same vein of Cole Bishop and Keon Coleman, that delay in being able to get on the field takes away your ability to develop, and it slows you down more to a point where you're just a rotational ancillary piece and then eventually a game day inactive, which was the most disappointing part of it to me, was just seeing kind of the fall from grace, especially because I just point to this Houston game. Not because it was perfect, because it wasn't by any stretch, but plenty of moments where I saw Carter shed and see him get into the backfield and create pressure. And I'm like, all right, kid, like, here we go. This is it. Like, rough couple games preseason, you're figuring it out, but I could see it now, and he's filling in for injury. And just, we didn't get that again. But I think it can be molded. I think it is possible in an offseason of training and refinement to his game and trying to figure out better ways to anchor and get low and not get pushed around would benefit him. But I'm with you, John. I just think right now, I didn't want Anthony to be right. And he might not be. No, I'm not calling Anthony out, but just I talked about Carter with him so much. Like, so much, and it broke my heart because I was like, he could be good. He's like, listen, he definitely could, but right now I just see him as a rotational DT, rotational 3-tech, and I'm like, I really don't want him to just be like what we had with Tim Settle. Like, I want him to be more, and I'm pulling for this guy to figure it out. But when it came to any semblance of integrity, when it came to running or run defense, it was hard to watch at times. It was just hard to watch. And I think that's going to be the biggest thing you got to work on, because if you want to hold your spot on this D line, you got to hold your integrity, your gap integrity. And I just don't think it was there for him. I'm hoping he figures it out, but I don't really know what else you can do. I don't know if it's putting more weight on. I don't know if it's just getting back to the lab and refining. Like, what is the path,
Well, I was just going to say that. What are you? Like, are you a 1-tech or a 3? You know what I mean? If you're a 1-tech, you can't play at 305 pounds. Like, that's just not going to cut it there.
No.
You can be 305 at a 3-tech where you're trying to pierce through some guards and stuff like that. But he doesn't have the athleticism and the mobility to do that. Like, he's not Ed Oliver. You know what I mean? He doesn't have that build, the length, the speed of an Ed Oliver where he's wreaking havoc. But he's also not big enough right now to hold the point of attack against double teams or in the run. So it's like, maybe your path forward, man, is go to the buffet. Like, maybe your path forward is just, you got to be in a calorie surplus, my guy. Like, I don't know.
Bulking season.
I don't know what the path is, but it might just be Uncrustables.
Yeah. 5 strawberry Uncrustables a night. 5 strawberry Uncrustables a night, a glass of milk, 10 bubblies. Let's go.
Yeah, that'll do it. Just as your nightcap. But like, I think that's it. Like, if he's going to be a rotational 1-tech, maybe someday fill in as a starter, maybe. Like, you've got to be a lot bigger and a lot stronger. And I don't know if his frame can really support that. I don't know that he's got that much more on him. Like, he's not going to go from 305 to 330. Like, if he is, he's going to lose any mobility whatsoever. He's just going to be your old school 1-tech fat guy that doesn't move. So I don't really know. Like, if he can get up to 315 and still have some spryness and the strength and conditioning can work with him there, like, maybe it'll help. But I think that it's a serious case of, like, body transformation kind of needs to happen, because what we saw rookie years, like, you're not big enough and or strong enough to hold the point of the attack right now against the run. So if you're going to be 305, dude, you got to get jacked. You got to be like bench pressing trucks at 305. So we'll see what happens. Maybe that's the route too. Maybe they just want to be like, all right, get strong as hell. Like, I don't know. I don't know what it's going to be.
And you know something? I wonder if a commitment to finding that true 1-tech in the draft, like your actual big man, whether that is a Grant, whether they get it later
Jamari
in the draft,
Caldwell,
whether you want to talk about like the kid, what is it? Norman Lott, I think, is the 1-tech, if I remember correctly. I'm trying to remember there's so many of them.
He's
that
got
I'm
athleticism though. He's got athleticism.
So
for sure.
I do think that a big part of the flaws for the DT room was the fact that there was no depth and no quality runs. Yeah. Like, even with Daquan Jones, like it was just, it wasn't consistent. It wasn't good enough. If you actually do find that player in the draft, then maybe it helps you because Carter might be able to be pushed into a true rotational 3-tech. And even if that's what he's got to be to just have a good enough season, like, and I like this from Spin because, yeah, you look at the size profile, and I was optimistic that can make it work. But, if you see that he's struggling with it, then you got to stop forcing the issue. But this is what I mean. If you don't have that personnel to fill in for DeQuan Jones and you just need anybody to go out there and do it, hence why they probably went and got Jefferson and Phillips towards the back half of the year, then getting the true 1-tech and someone that if you still have Jones for the one more year and you don't let him go, but you get this young prospect that could take a brunt of that work and putting him into that 3-tech role just to get something and give him some spark. That wasn't that to me is just, that's it. That's the path for Carter to remain on the team, to remain successful, and to remain someone that you could actually turn to and put him in better positions to succeed, where if it's not facing a double, but you're manned up or one-on-one with a guard, he can get a ball through. He can get to the backfield, and it could be successful. And Spin's going into the chat, but I'm saying he played all over the line. First off, it wasn't just exclusively 3-tech. I saw him take reps at 1. I saw him take reps right or out even. It was a mix of 3, but they saw him take 1-tech 2 and just tried to mold him, and it didn't work. So
I think it was out of necessity, like you said, Joe. I don't think that they drafted him to be a 1-tech. I just think he was the best option that they had behind DeQuan Jones. You know what I mean? Like, I think that it was just out of necessity that they put him there. Now, here's my concern. We know that the Bills have a ton of draft picks this year. They have 10 of them. We know that they're going to be going after defensive line in some capacity. I mean, there's a chance that he doesn't make the roster. Like, that's not out of the realm of possibility. I think that it's not likely, but if you bring in a 1-tech, like a true 1-tech, and Alfred Collins, Jamari Caldwell, 330-pound, 340-pound guy to be your backup at 1-tech, and then you have someone else that comes in at 3-tech that shows more athleticism and more ability to get to the quarterback, does DeWayne Carter, maybe he makes the roster, but is he a game day inactive like every week? Like, is he your 5th defensive lineman? And I think there was a lot of times where they carried 4. So I think that it does get a little sticky for him. And I don't want to say that after just 1 year, but it's like, dude, something's got to change in your profile. You either got to get like a lot faster and play a 3-tech, or you got to crush some Uncrustables and play 1-tech. Like, I don't know, but something has to change in order for him to have a path on this roster. Otherwise, they're going to look at him as a tweener that can't really do either. And that's not a successful path.
Yeah, you got to commit, and like, it's good to be versatile, but you gain that versatility from having the high enough floor to play both positions, right? Like, if you talked about, like, if Cole Bishop developed in the deeper half role to a point where you're comfortable with him playing that most of the time, then you'd feel good about him playing, box or deep and being a more versatile safety. So I like that. It's like, what are you and what's the role you're giving him? Because with Carter, I think if you just commit to one thing to start, we build it off the other way. And it felt like there was something of like a Bills D-line identity crisis, which is why I'll keep going back to, they just needed the body, and they put the body in a bad position. And I'm sure it weighed heavy on him too. So I don't think, I get it being a concern. I think he's still going to be on the roster, but what is the function for DeWayne Carter?
Right.
How many DTs do they bring in? And are they bringing guys that have multiple alignment, like, or are able to play multiple alignments? Like, can I have someone who could be potentially a 1, slide to 3, and maybe even kick out wide like they did with Smoot sometime this year?
Derek Harmon could do that. Like, if they get
if
they get aggressive and they bring a guy in like Harmon, like, ooh, man, you're kind of in trouble there now to find some playing time, because Harmon can go from 0 to 5. Like, he is a big fellow with athleticism, and he can hold the point of attack also. So I think he makes the roster. Like, I'm not saying that that's my prediction, but like, you're trending towards being the odd man out in the future unless something changes. And I think that's just kind of my biggest point.
No, absolutely. And we'll just have to see. Again, I will keep saying this. I was a huge fan of the pick. I really liked his game. I liked that they went for defensive tackle last year, and I thought they got him as a steal. Obviously, rookie season was disappointing, and I'm still going to be optimistic in some degree. But I do think right now the expectations have been tempered to just rotational 3T until proven otherwise. But that's a world you could still live in. It could still very much help the team. And if that is the way for DeWayne Carter to eventually be able to wear more hats and become more reliable in that role, then so be it. But I think a lot was put on his plate as a rookie, and it just didn't pan out the way the team wanted it to. And unfortunately, the way we wanted it to. But No bad things. Rooting for the guy. 5 Uncrustables a night for the foreseeable future. Let's get up to 320 together, man. But
yeah, baby.
let's move on. Let's move on to Ray Davis, the final rookie that we'll talk about extensively tonight. And I was pleased. I mean, there's no other way to put it. I was never expecting Ray Davis to put up 1,000 yards. I was never expecting anything to the degree of rotational back that has his moments. I would just like to see some positives in pass blocking, which mixed bag. I thought he did really well as a runner. I thought when he went between the tackles, it was really encouraging, but I think he also has a lot of juice when it came to his balance, his ability to stay upright, even when he's facing contact and how he pushes through it. I like Ray Davis a lot. And I also like the times they did use him as a receiving back. And I hope that that in general goes up next year for everybody, but especially with Ray Davis. John, back to you. Thoughts on him?
Yeah, I was surprised by that element of his game. Like, they didn't use him a ton in college in the passing game. Like, it was there, but not a lot. I didn't expect him to have 19 targets this year and catch 17 of them. Like, that is a very pleasant surprise. Like, oh, okay, we have more versatility in this backfield than I think we thought we did. My biggest thing for him was he stepped in against the Jets when James Cook was out and had a ball out game. 97 rushing yards, 3 of 3 on his targets for 55 more yards after that. Like, this is a guy that showed that he's capable of coming in if needed and being a starting caliber running back. Now, he's not the same level as James Cook right now. Absolutely not. James Cook wasn't that level when he was a rookie either, by the way. Continued to develop. But he showed that he's a very capable and versatile running back that's able to come in and do a little bit of everything. He runs with power. They used him a lot in short yardage situations. He was a little bit of the hammer, even though he has more agility and explosiveness to just label him as that. You know what I mean? He wasn't just the hammer, but that's how they used him in a lot of situations where I think that continues. I don't know if you've heard, there's just a little bit of a running back conversation happening around the league and with the Bills in particular right now. So I think having a talented second running back on the roster right now looks very important.
I agree completely. I really can't add too much to it. I mean, what we got from Ray Davis is kind of what we wanted. You got him in the 4th round from Kentucky. He is a bit of an older prospect, but you saw the potential in his game and being kind of a nice mix with James Cook behind that offensive line that predicates itself on physicality and could beat you up in the trenches. He's a great complement to everything they have going on right now. And I think this year too, it's really just how much of his role increases. What do they do with their third back? Is Ty Johnson coming back? Because Ty Johnson, with the flashes he had, there's perfect justification for this team to give him a contract and get him back. But if they don't, do they think Ray Davis can man some of that role? Not that they're the same player, but rather just up the snap count, up the share, be able to get him as your primary 2 and mix them in. And more importantly, what does it look like if they are your primary 2 backs? And does Joe Brady get creative and maybe run some pony with both of these guys on the field if he so chooses? Does he want to utilize him as a receiver a bit more? Again, it's all about your development. And I think pass blocking is just such a big component when you talk about the Bills, when you talk about what their offense does from their tight ends, from their receivers, from their running backs. And with Ray Davis, more enhancement in that, I think, gets him on the field more often, especially if you're looking at a potential world without James Cook, whether that's this upcoming season or the season after. I like having him in the room. I like his profile. I think there really isn't much negative I'll say about him for what his rookie year was, apart from, even though he didn't have like a detrimental amount of fumbles, I did see some times where I got a little nervous about ball security, but rookie running back happened to Cook, happens to a lot of people. Tighten that up and maybe we'll be okay. And really just get better as a pass blocker. And again, he wasn't the best at it, but I thought there was a lot to build off of from his time at UK. And I think as a pro, if he's getting in position and able to kind of get to even most of that level that Ty Johnson got to, that's going to make him a big part of this offense for the foreseeable future. And I'm a huge fan of Davis. I mean, just as a person, as a player, he did everything you wanted him to do. And you talked about the Jets game, but like, I think about it a lot too, the off script component, right? And I talked about this with Ty Johnson when we talk about players and the roster and who's got to come back, whatever. A big thing for me is how do you work with Josh Allen off script? Because Josh Allen is going to go off script. And you need to be really good at understanding that when he rolls out of the pocket, sirens are going off like it's like the Benny Hill theme starts playing. Just everything goes absolutely insane, and you need to have the chemistry with this quarterback to be able to be in the positions when Josh wants to go sicko mode, which I think Coleman is doing, and that's awesome, and I love that. But Davis, to be able to go off script with him and get into the open field and make that play, just get up there, get behind the DBs, and get that. I was like, this is it. Like, he can do this. I believe in this. I needed to see it. Like, Cook can do it. Now Davis has that ability, and I'm only showing you one example, but you could build off this if you give him more snaps, if you give him more opportunity, and you're willing to go to him more often. Plenty of flashes, plenty of positive runs. I'm a huge fan. I like the pick. Nothing consequential about it. Only good things from here, really. Like, I think Ray Davis is the one that gives me the least stress on this list. Just like, yeah, man, even if you run back what you did in your rookie year, like, it was still pretty solid for running back 3. If you go to 2, let's up the production is really the only thing I ask.
Yeah, I think that ability to play off script, he got a little taste of it in college. His college quarterback was Will Levis. So that shared ability in Kentucky, you think Will Levis was just sitting back there and operating from the pocket and doing everything exactly how it's scripted? Hell no. So I think Ray Davis got a little bit of that mentality instilled in him in college, which helps in this situation. So I like it as well. I think that he's awesome. I think he's a great addition. That's great. A bowling ball than a hammer. He is a bowling ball. He's built. We saw it last year down at the Senior Bowl, man. He was just rumbling. And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, I saw that on tape. It's nice to see it in person. He's a great second running back. I loved it. Remember, we were out there. We were standing down in the crowd when that pick was made. And I was just like, oh, yeah. Like, love this pick as a second running back. Yeah, I mean, I don't think we're getting into the whole James Cook situation here, but I think you're comfortable in your options behind Cook right now, where if that was needed, whether it's a holdout or whether he's not on the team or whatever, I think that it's a fine place to be with room for improvement. And we'll see what the next 2 months hold before the draft, really.
Yeah, James Cook is valuable to this offense. I'm not trying to downplay his impact.
Me neither.
I think it's more, and not saying you are, just more so, like, when I say this, I feel comfortable if we have to survive a couple games without Cook because we have Davis, and if it's Johnson or one of the many running backs in this class who show you a lot of potential to fill in. I think Ray Davis, again, in the game that James Cook got hurt, stepped up really well and matched that Bills physical front really well. And again, when he's in the open field or when he's got acceleration, he's going to keep going. And I like this from Roy because Roy does bring up the one thing that Ray Davis doesn't give you is speed. Maybe not, but if you're hard to bring down, then you're still going to generate that yak. And not having the breakaway ability to the degree that like Cook may have does suck. But I will still take the punishing nature of the way this man runs the ball every day of the week. And, you know, if it's the difference between, okay, he broke in the open field and it turned into a 30-yard run instead of a 40-yard run that's a touchdown, I still trust this Bills offense to punch it in. Like, they just always seem to find a way to. And what more demoralizing thing for a defense than we just gave up a chunk run to Ray Davis, and now they line up under center in the red zone and give it right back to him? That's going to hurt. I don't want to deal with that. That's why I don't play football, because football hurts. But I'm encouraged by him. I think of, you know, wrapping this up, just talking about this list, and even with Carter, I'll include this. I think everyone had flashes to some degree that can give you something to take away going into year 2 for every player. With Coleman, it was the athleticism that we were promised and just a lack of refinement that I think as he gets older, more time in the league, then that is something that can be developed and hopefully is a more polished receiver used in more unique ways to give him more chances beyond just going to the boundary and go up. And maybe that'll come with whoever they add to the offense. Maybe that comes with differences in the playbook this offseason. We will have to see. Bishop, we know how athletic he is. He was playing from behind because of that injury, gets on the field, and each week develops a little bit more. Closing speed was there. Tackling ability, while it was hit or miss, I thought when he made those hits was really solid. I think there is a player there that if you can get him into the rhythm of being a safety in the Bills defense and grow his ability to communicate and understand how to be in the right position post-snap when you're disguising something, this is a guy that can give you both that box mentality, that really aggressive upfront safety play, and the deep half play, which is very important in this Bills defense. Carter, still love you, Carter. Get it. But we saw the flashes. I know there's something there. I don't think this guy is done. I don't think he's going to roll over and die. I think he just needs to be, like you said, find his identity, commit to something that you think he could be good at. And if that is truly rotational 3 tech, then so be it to start. And maybe, again, the role develops more as he gets more comfortable. And Ray Davis, just keep doing what you're doing. And if you end up becoming that RB2 and get yourself into that position where the snap share goes up, whether it's because Cook's gone, whether it's because Johnson's gone, and you have a rookie come in, I'm very optimistic about the future of this guy in what will probably be a running back standard 4-year deal for the Bills. John, final thoughts before we sign off.
Solid but not exceptional rookie season all the way around with room to grow. I think that's the general takeaway. And I just want to see Brandon Beane, like I said at the start, I want to be having this conversation a year from now and be like, blank player is a bleeping stud. Like that's the conversation I want to have a year from now. So let's try, man. What lines up well is that the depth and the talent at the positions that we directly need, those line up. And that's a very good thing. So you need an edge, you need a defensive tackle, you need a corner. Get one with a sky-high ceiling that's already a good ball player. And let's see what happens.
And don't be afraid of an older prospect, I think is the final thing I'll say too. Because like you look at the Rams, right? Like it's like a player turns 24 and everyone's scared of them. And I think that's so funny because like Ray Davis is a great example. Like Ray Davis is an older prospect, but he had a great year and he was a pretty high floor rookie to begin with. Whereas you look at some of the traits he picks that Beane has taken, like a Gregory Rousseau or like a Keon Coleman, and these are extremely young, raw players, and there is a commitment to their development. And if you are Brandon Beane, it's up to you to decide. Do you want to go for the really cool athletic traits like a Deion Walker or like a Landon Jackson on your D-line this year? Or do you want to say, nah, we need this now. We are, even though I don't believe in a window in his eyes, we just went to the AFC Championship and lost. I need impact players. Let's get this now. Then that's it. So I feel pretty good about this rookie class. I think a lot of them are going to be mainstays for this Bills team next season and seasons to come. But I think this draft class is the very pivotal nexus event for this team, because when you talk about all of this retooling, all of this trying to get younger youth infusion, cap space generation, because you were in a tough spot last season, this class being good and you hitting on these picks, whether it's even just half of them, even if it's just, 30-something% of them, if you could just get one elite player or just 4 really good players, or however it's got to be, that is a huge swing for the next few years. So this is a big draft class, Brandon Beane. We're trusting you. Don't mess it up. And DeWayne, 5 Uncrustables at night and a glass of milk. It could be non-dairy if you'd prefer, whatever your preference is. But John, I appreciate you, man. This was a ton of fun. I always love having you on this show. You always give me great analysis on everything we talk about, and I appreciate you and your time. Please let all of these good people know what you got going on in your world.
Yeah. A2Zsports.com. I cover the Buffalo Bills. I will be doing a ton of work in the next month and a half, breaking down prospects, doing mock drafts. I'm actually going to be posting a Bills mock draft this week. So if you want to be looking at who some of those rookies might be, follow along. Let's chat at John Helmkamp on X. And really looking forward to it. We're in ramp up mode. It's draft season, baby.
It's draft season, friends. It's also free agency season. And next week, that's what we'll be talking about on the show. But John, thank you again. And if you haven't followed John, please do so on Twitter, on all social media platforms. Works his butt off and puts out some great content, great analysis. And I actually met John through Cover One when we were talking about draft stuff. And it is just so fun to engage in those conversations with you, man. So again, thank you to all of you in the chat. Thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode of Under Review. We appreciate everyone's contributions to our chat room. As always, if you are interested in the One Pass, check the description below. You can find the link to sign up. Again, 60 gold doubloons a year gets you some pretty sweet perks. As I mentioned earlier in this episode, the shirt is an option. Join our Discord and just be a part of an awesome community with a bunch of people that we engage with on a day-to-day basis. It's really cool stuff. My name's Joe DeRosa. You can find me on Twitter /X at @show_DRosa. And do not go anywhere if you are on YouTube or really any of our streaming platforms, because at 9 p.m. you could check out my guest from last week, Mr. Anthony Prohaska, on Disguise Coverage. And his episode, if I looked at it correctly and didn't look at something wrong, it's going to be on free agency. And you know, Ant, he's going to get down to the nitty gritty in detail, and you cannot miss it. You're not allowed to. I'm actually forcing you all to go watch it. I'll be in the chat room as well, because I always do that. But again, John, thank you. Everyone in the chat, thank you. We'll see you next week. And as always, go Bills. See you soon.